Hello, welcome to Fats on Film. I am your host, Hannah Ogilvie, and this week we are talking about The Silence of the Lambs, a horror thriller classic. And this week I am so pleased to introduce my very first guest on Fats on Film. It's Meg Kenny. Hello, Meg.
Hello.
Hello. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm very excited to talk about this film.
Oh, good. I'm so happy you're here. And for the listeners who don't know who you are, who are you and what's your interest? Why do we know each other?
Who am I? Why am I here? Why is any of us here?
That's a very big question.
So I am a writer. So we met because we both write for Ghouls.
We do, yes.
Which is very exciting. And I'm also a parapsychologist and a researcher. And I'm co-host of the Monstrous Flesh podcast, which is we've released the trailer for, and we'll be dropping the first episode soon. So that's very exciting. And I am a horror fanatic, just a lover of the genre.
Absolutely.
So I'm very excited and very pleased that you asked me to be on, actually. I'm very much looking forward to it.
I'm so thankful you're here. And we had it, as you do on the podcast, we've had a bit of a brief chat just beforehand. And I was just explaining to Meg, this is something I'm passionate about. And what's been awesome is putting myself out there and finding other people like yourself who are also passionate about this subject matter. And I'm like, where have we been? Why have we not had this club sooner?
Yeah, where have we all been? We've all been alone.
We've all been alone wondering, where are all the other fat people who are annoyed about how fat people are treated? So I put myself out there going okay, I want to talk about this now. And here we are. People have come out the woodwork going, actually, yes. now you've said that, I think we do need to have a conversation. So right, we're talking about Silence of the Lambs. So let's get into just kind of the cultural impact of Silence of the Lambs. So it came out in 1991. It's based off the book by Thomas Harris. It's directed by Jonathan Demme, and he is quite a prolific director himself. He did Philadelphia. He did The Manchurian Candidate. So he's no stranger to massive. I guess I was going to say epics, but The Silence of the Lambs, we'll get into it. It's a different kind of epic, in my opinion. And then screenplay is written by Ted Tally, which is a fantastic name.
Wonderful.
Ted Tally, and he also did Red Dragon, which is it's the prequel sequel.
The prequel sequel. That's such a good way. Such a good way to describe it.
It is. You know what? I'm already on a tangent. I remember I definitely saw Red Dragon before I saw Silence of the Lambs when I was really young, and I just remember Ralph Fiennes in the burning building at the end.
Oh, yeah.
That seared into my brain. And is it Emily Watson or Samantha Moore?
Oh, it's
one of them.
Emily Watson. I think Emily Watson. Yes.
And she's blind in it, and she's she goes up to the body on the floor, and she realizes it's blood. Oh my god, that is in my brain. So Red Dragon, it's starring our gal Jodie Foster and Anthony Tony Hopkins.
Yes.
Legends. It made $270 million, which is unreal to think about, that a horror thriller type film can make that much money at the box office. I mean, I hope one day that comes back again, but that is amazing. This film did so well, and it won all 5 major Oscar categories. Do you know what the 5 major categories are?
I don't. I mean, I know there's best actor, best supporting actor, best screenplay.
Yeah, so they class the 5 major categories as best actor, best actress, best director, best screenplay, and best picture. And Silence of the Lambs took all that in, and that's the 3rd film to ever do so.
Wow.
So the other 2 films I've ever done that are It Happened One Night, which is from the 30s, and then One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And those are the only 3 films to have ever done that. And I just think, seeing as we've just got past the Oscars, I thought that was pretty cool to know. So anyway, Meg, can you let us know, what is The Silence of the Lambs about?
Oh, well, yes, I can. So, an inexperienced yet ambitious FBI agent, Clarice Starling, is drawn into the grisly investigation of Buffalo Bill, a serial killer who is murdering women and taking parts of their skin. Ugh. So, as part of this investigation, Clarice is tasked with getting a profile from the renowned psychiatrist Hannibal Lecter, otherwise known as Hannibal the Cannibal, now serving life in a high-security mental health facility. And so what follows then is a cat and mouse game of psychological warfare as Clarice fights to locate Buffalo Bill and save his latest victim. But the question then becomes, can she save his latest victim, but also save herself?
Oh, dun dun dun. Brilliant. Perfect. You know, as I was watching, I watched this film yesterday in prep for this podcast, and I realized Clarice is a name we never hear of now.
Oh, I know, it's wonderful.
It's such a good name. I was like, where are all our Clarices in our world?
Where are the Clarices?
And then I was like, oh, also Hannibal isn't a very well used name either. But I think Hannibal the Cannibal really ruined that name for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think like the earlier Hannibal were also like a warlord, I think. So you know, it's
okay.
I feel like, I mean,
that'll change it.
Don't write in if that's wrong, but
but we do not take criticism on this podcast. They will be ignored.
We do not take criticism, and we are not fact checked.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, very strong names, I think.
Great names. Straight away.
Yeah.
So why did you suggest this film for the Fats on Film podcast?
Well, the first thing I would say is that I do credit and now curse this film with setting me on the career path that I've been down for some time.
Okay.
Because when I saw it, I just wanted to be Clarice Starling. I mean, who wouldn't? Wonderful. And so that then led me down the road of sort of forensic psychology, and so I did my PhD in forensic psychology and all that jazz. And I think for that reason, it were a very influential sort of film, really. And I mean, it came out in 91, so I'm not very old. So I didn't see it until much later, but definitely saw it before Red Dragon. I probably saw it younger than I should have seen it. I feel like it's one of them films that I probably saw and didn't really get what was going on. And I think when you watch films like that when you're young, somehow they become so ingrained in your psyche in a way that when you watch films as an adult, they just don't. You know, like I think about certain scenes in the film that I'm sure we'll get into. Spoilers. I will give lots of spoilers.
Oh no, I mean, you've had 32 years to...
If you've not watched it by now, it's too late.
It's too late for you.
But I think about like that when she finds that head in that jar.
Oh yeah.
And, like, it floats up and you know, just horrifying, you know, which now, I mean, when you watch it now, I suppose, although I think the subject matter is still pretty horrifying, it's pretty tame, but like I remember seeing it and thinking, oh my God.
Yeah.
But also, I mean, obviously for this podcast, Fats on Film, I think there's a very sinister sort of subtext to it about women's bodies and where women's bodies are treated. And I think it's an interesting one for that. I mean, I suppose I should just jump straight in, I guess, to the you know, the fact that like Buffalo Bill is deliberately targeting women who are, you know, 14 plus dress sizes for the, I mean, this is grotesque, isn't it? But for the wiggle room, I suppose, you know, which is a really gross thing to be doing. Generally, I mean, skinning women's not cool, bro. It's not really cool.
It's not cool.
But I think it's an interesting one. I mean, I'd like to know your opinion on it, actually, because do you think that comes across as sort of justified, or do you think it's penalised? Because obviously we know the ending of the film and everything else, but is that aspect of it, do you think that's addressed in a satisfactory way?
So I'm in two minds with this, because so from Buffalo Bill's perspective, he is targeting his victims purely because of their size. Like there is no other reason. Oh, well, I guess they are a woman, and also because they are big. And his logic being, if they're bigger, it means they have more skin. And if he starves them for 3 days, they will lose enough weight for it to be like more, I guess, stretchy, for lack of a better term. And I'm like, first of all, that's not how bodies work.
There's a fundamental flaw here.
The massive flaw, Bill. Like 3 days is nowhere near enough time for what you're trying to do. But I understand in the idea of like plot and story mechanics, there needs to be a time limit.
You need the ticking clock.
Yes, exactly. So I'm like, oh, like it's not how bodies work, but at the same time, I understand why you've done it. But he I find he finds this weird line between, he shows utter disrespect to his victims, obviously, you know, he murders them, he starves them, he calls Catherine Martin, who's the victim we're following. So there'd been 5 victims up to this point in the film, and now we're following his latest victim. That's when Clarice is brought onto the case. So we're following Catherine Martin and hopefully hoping she's going to get saved. And he goes to her, it moisturizes the skin when it is told. So like, he doesn't see her as a person. He sees her as this object, which obviously that's not great. Then this particular watch through, and I guess I was watching with a finer eye than I normally would, when the infamous scene where he is naked and he's dancing with the scalp on his head, he puts on a necklace of a fat woman, almost like someone might wear a cross. And I thought, oh, that's almost like you view a bigger body like as a deity. And that, I was like, oh, you're showing more respect to a bigger body, or just even like womanly flesh, more than you have previously. So I was like, I don't know really actually what that was trying to say. I don't know whether like he does actually really appreciate in his own way these women's sacrifice. I'm using air quotes here, sacrifice, because in the film he's obviously very damaged. We can get into the whole transgender issue and how the representation of that works in a bit, but they make it clear that his desire to become a woman is baked into severe trauma. So I'm wondering if he's actually viewing these women who he's murdering and skinning for their skin, if he views them almost like a sacrifice for him in order to enable the life he wants. And I just found that like a really interesting nuance, which I hadn't caught before.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really fascinating. And obviously the character's based on Ed Gein, who, you know, again, a very traumatized individual, not that they're excuses his sort of behavior, but very traumatized, I mean, you know, Ed Gein's been inspiration for a few people, Norman Bates as well.
Yeah.
You know, this idea about Texas Chainsaw Massacre as well, and this idea of the sort of brutalizing mother, and then like an inability to move beyond that. And I think you see that in Buffalo Bill. There's obviously someone he's trying to become. It's just never clear who that is. So I mean, I suppose you could argue it's not relevant to the story in terms of his motivation. The fact is he's still, you know, killing women for the skins to make this suit.
Yeah.
But I do think, and I suppose, again, you could argue that that's better than what we get now. I mean, I'm not even going to get into the absolute, you know, disgusting Jeffrey Dahmer thing. You know, I'm not even going to get into that. I don't think it deserves any more airtime. I think what the glamorizing of perpetrators is a big problem in our culture.
100%.
And so I don't know if it's better in a way that we don't understand him, because it keeps him the sort of the baddie. We can't empathize because we don't know. You know?
Interestingly, on that, we're so intrigued by Hannibal Lecter, and he is a bad man. You know, he is a bad man. So instead of like trying to bring that intrigue, or, you know, not bringing that many complexities to Buffalo Bill, they've moved that to almost like this. He's not an anti-hero because he's a murderer, a murdering cannibal, but he really is in the grayest of areas where he respects Clarice to a certain degree and wants to help her, wants to save this victim he doesn't know, but it's you know, to gain more information to Clarice, so he is getting something out of it. It's just so like fascinating. I love, I mean, I think this is like the most, you know, obvious statement in the world, but Anthony Hopkins in this film is just magnetic. And even though you know you shouldn't be, you know, want to keep him at arm's length, he just draws you in. It's brilliant. He's brilliant. And oh my god, I just love the campness of like some of his lines, like what, like the initial meeting when he goes like, you look like a rube. Or like with your nice bag and your cheap shoes. I was like, oh my god, the shade.
But that's the thing, isn't it? Like, and I do think that perhaps, and maybe I mean, my thing I always get on about is class and class representations, but maybe there's an element of that to it, that obviously Anthony Hopkins is a psychiatrist, is very high, you know, very upper class before he were arrested. And Buffalo Bill's this very working class, lives in a very sort of rundown neighborhood. Like that's what enables him to perpetrate his offences, because no one's watching. But again, that idea that he's somehow not deserving of that complexity, but Anthony Hopkins is, because he is. But then also, I mean, from a narrative point of view, obviously Anthony Hopkins, and it's the dynamic between Annabelle and Clarice that is the centre of the film, really. Even like Catherine Martin, even she is sort of secondary, really. You know, she's the sort of catalyst, but really the film is about their dynamic. And it is an interesting dynamic, and it is interesting to see. And that when he's sort of reading her really, really cruelly to show he can, you know, but then she just undercuts him and says, you know, when she says, oh, you're really good, you see a lot, but maybe you're scared to turn that on yourself. And that's what gets him, because she's not. What I like about Clarice is she's frightened of him, and she's very clearly frightened of him, but she refuses to be cowed by him. So even though she's scared, she's still not going to let him talk to her like that. She's not going to let him, you know, look down his nose at her. And I think that's really to be admired. And obviously we know from when she's telling him things that she's from a working class background, you know, she's had to fight to get to where she is.
Absolutely.
And that makes her character that much more interesting as well. You know, even when you see that, when I were writing synopsis and I was sort of looking through and I saw someone say inexperienced, and I thought she is inexperienced, fine, but also massively ambitious. And it's interesting you leave that out at synopsis to me, because it's how she's minimized, even in film, even in how people treat her, as though she's somehow, you know, she's not a worthy opponent. And I think we have that dynamic between her and Annabelle Lecter that he comes to see she is a sparring partner. And how the books sort of develop then is very much that dynamic getting a bit more twisted up, really, to be honest. I mean, I don't know if you've seen Hannibal, the sort of third one, but even that's weird, again, spoilers. But, you know, like, that's weird, because you are going, oh, I hope they end up together. I hope they, but then you think, oh god, no. You don't want to end up with him, but he's so charismatic.
I know. I mean, I guess it's just such a trope of cinema. There's like charismatic sociopath or psychopath or whatever. So I just think of like Dexter, like, oh my god, like I wanted to ride Dexter all day long when I was younger. And I would look back on it, when they brought it back recently, and I was watching, I was like, oh my god, I used to fancy him so hard, but he is a murderer. Like, where is my like self-preservation here?
But that's the thing. I mean, it's like like Sopranos. I mean, everybody roots for Tony Soprano, and you think, well, why? Because, you know, he's a bad guy, he's doing bad things. But again, it's that complexity, which, to be fair, Hannibal hasn't even got that complexity. You just like him because he's charismatic. Like,
because he's charismatic.
He's not. He has no guilt about what he does.
No. He's proud of it. Like, you know,
it's like,
he's
I rude people.
Yeah, I'm here. You know, what are you gonna do about it?
But I think, again, thinking about, you know, bodies and representation and things, how Clarice is treated. I think as this, you know, she's seen as this dainty, petite, sort of fragile everyone treats her like she's fragile.
Yes, absolutely. And there's like so many scenes, especially at the beginning when she's like, Crawford's asked her back into the academy, and she goes into a lift, and she's surrounded by, much taller men than herself. And it was really to like amplify how petite Jodie Foster is and how slight she is. And I was going to ask you about that. Like, what is Crawford's goal with bringing Clarice in? Because he must have a school of people he could have chosen from for this exercise. Her roommate or friend, if he wanted like that womanly presence to maybe seduce slightly or disarm Hannibal, he could have picked her. Why does he pick Clarice?
I think it could be part of see, because what I think is so interesting is when you first see her, she's running and she's going like L for leather. She's going,
she is,
and she's
fit.
pushing, and she's fit, and I mean, obviously that's a big requirement. You have to keep your fitness up, but she's like, you can see even in that, and it's a really good sort of establishing shot of her, I think, because you see straight away how determined she is. Like
exactly.
She's running, she's pushing herself and pushing herself.
Yeah.
And she does, I mean, I think there's even like a conversation where it's like, why her? But she excels. She's top of her class. But there is always that allusion to, oh, well, we'll send Pretty Woman in. And he's not seen a woman in such a long time that he'll just be slavering at your feet, which is an insult to both of them. But I do think as you watch film, that is overcome. And initially, I think, Hannibal obviously thinks, oh, what have they done? Sent this young woman in thinking that she's going to flirt around me. And she does try that a little bit.
Yeah.
He's a bit like, oh, maybe you'll just do this. And he's like, don't cheapen yourself.
Yes.
Like, don't embarrass me.
You were doing so well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it is cheap and it's beneath her. And I think, again, that idea about respect, even straight away, he has that respect for her. To be like, don't cheapen yourself and your ability. You can get information out of me, other ways. But I don't know. I mean, it could be that he does see that in her. Crawford sees that determination and, sees that she is a force to be reckoned with, and rather than there's illusion as well about the fact that, oh, is he trying to get in your pants? That's why he's letting you succeed. And it really highlights, I think, as a film, that really toxic sort of male dominated environment of law enforcement and of FBI and this very masculine, or is seen as very masculine. And so she's trying to be masculine in a way. She's trying to push all that softness aside because it's weakness, it's and you see that start to crumble as film goes on, and when she's like begging him to help her and he's like, I've tell you, you've got this information, because to him it's just always a game, it's, and I think that's the, when people sort of relate to him, I do think that gets cut off at a certain point when you think, well, he could have ended this days ago. He knows who this guy is.
Yeah.
And it does highlight that he is a horrible psychopath.
Yeah, he only told her because he got something in return.
Yeah.
If she had never come forth with her memories, with her past, he would never have told Clarice who Buffalo Bill truly is. Which, yeah, like he is just for himself. Like he is like, I guess psychopaths or sociopaths have to be narcissistic. But yeah, he is textbook narcissism. Like, this is just for me. You're here for me. But I think to your point about how he like really encourages her to play the game the best that she can. Like we you mentioned how he can read her, but he also wants a worthy competitor. He doesn't want a cheap fight. And I think in that moment, so when Clarice kind of goes in and she tries to slyly, and it's really not sly, bless her, like bring back the questionnaire, she's doing what she thinks Crawford wants her to do. And he and Hannibal is saying, no, you're better than that. And it's almost like he can see more of her than Crawford can see in her, and he's only just met her. And I find that really interesting, and it inspires her to keep going and scheme and lie to his face and kind of get that confidence up, which is really, love a confident woman, get it. But maybe not great that it's fed by this cannibal. Maybe not. But there was something else I wanted to say. Oh, I do think I kept on clocking it. Was every man is a very male dominated film. I know it's obviously the lead is Jodie Foster, but I think there might be like 4 or 5 women actually if you count Catherine Martin's mum. And everyone else is a guy. And everyone is referred to as Sir. Even at the end, Clarice still calls Hannibal Dr. Lecter. Like that level of respect. But no one really calls Clarice ma'am or miss. It's always Clarice or just straight to her last name. And I just thought that was a really interesting dynamic where like she doesn't seem to walk in with the same respect as the man does because people refer to her as her first name. And you could argue it's because she's a woman, because she's petite, because she's young. But it's interesting how like even at the end she's still not getting it, even though when she gets her, oh well, I guess she gets called Special Agent Starling at the end, which I love. I'm like, oh yay. And there's an interesting scene where they go to the funeral of one of the victims and they are meet up with the local law enforcement there to get the latest, and they want to go to the, I guess it must be the morgue to do the autopsy on the victim. And there's just a sea of policemen, and Clarice is the one who turns around going, okay everyone, gotta go, we've got to give this woman some respect, give her some respect. And I loved how in that moment she's championing the victim. And I don't know whether I'm reading too much into this, but this is my podcast, I'll read as much into it but I just felt like all of those people were staying in there because they wanted to have a look at this dead body, and they were curious and voyeuristic, and she's the one who's like, I'm going to defend this fellow woman who can't defend herself, and be like, no, she deserves, she doesn't deserve these gawking eyes on her. And maybe you could argue she just wants to get on with her job, and she's very nervous. It might be the first dead body she's ever seen, so she's very nervous about when she's like got the recorder and she's explaining the different wounds that are on her body and hypothesizing what could have caused her death, and her voice is very shaky. And I wondered, like, is it because it's a dead body, and I've never seen a dead body. I can only imagine it's horrifying to see one for the first time. There's pressure, she's got a lot of eyes on her to do this correctly. But I also think there's a level of like empathy for this victim, and to see a woman be brutalized in that fashion, I think that really rocks her, and I maybe brings it home that this isn't just, having a silly flirt with Dr. Lecter. This is serious. Someone's life is on the line, as another body could end up on this table if we don't resolve this. And I think all that pressure falls on her at that moment as a young, ambitious woman.
Absolutely. And I think, she's, I suppose, thrown in out of her depth, really, and everybody expects her to fail. And she's determined not to fail for herself, but also because she's really desperate to save Catherine. It is Catherine. Why do I keep wanting to say Caroline? Oh no, that's a chef, Caroline Martin.
Not her.
Yeah, she really wants to save Catherine Martin, and she wants to stop this man who is hurting these women. And like you said, the sort of personal identification with, I think women can all relate to that, to that idea that, well, that could be me, but I suppose in this instance, that identification, it's nice, actually, and this is first time, just as I'm just talking, this is a thought that's coming to me, but it's nice that she is so readily identifying with them, when it could have easily been that she didn't, because she didn't look like them.
100%.
Yeah,
100%.
But that's irrelevant. That never comes up.
No.
And there's never any. And to be fair, like, I know it's obviously forms part of profile that he's targeting women who are bigger for this reason. But I'd be interested again to it. I never feel necessarily that the women who are being targeted are demonized by the sort of investigators for the fact that they're bigger.
Yeah,
it's just a fact of the case, but obviously to come up with that is gross. I mean, it's offensive. I suppose it is offensive if you take it from a purely objectifying standpoint, which is,
yeah, I think, well, when I was watching this time, I was looking for when do they actually say it. When do they actually mention it's because, like, the thing they have in common is that they are all white big women, and I don't think they ever mention the victim profile. And until she is, oh god, is it when she's in Baltimore and she's investigating one of the victims, she goes into the house and she notices it's the dress pattern in the wardrobe, and that's when she clicks, it's he's taking parts of like a pattern of the skin, he's making a suit, and she says that's why they're all so big, so he can starve them and, like, use their skin. And that, I think that's the first time, like you said, the investigators mention it. And I actually want to bring that up. So as an audience, we realize as soon as we meet Buffalo Bill and he's stalking Catherine, that he's targeting her because she is big. So the first shot we have of her is when she's in the car and she's singing.
Love that song as well.
yeah, exactly. And it's just she's so, like, cute and joyful
and vibrant, getting on.
Love that. Always, I want all of that all the time. But I think, like, one thing she has is like a fuller face. So a fuller face is a really easy way to, like, indicate to the audience this is a, not necessarily a smaller person. So, and I'm also toying in my head, like, this is 91. How many bigger people were they seeing regularly on our screens? So, like, was it really obvious to 1991 audiences, this person's big, as soon as they saw that fuller face? And then they really doubled down when they do, and when she gets out of her car, she's got a grocery bag, which I thought was quite interesting, and she's going to go to her flat, and Buffalo Bill asks, can you help me lift this sofa up? He's got a broken arm a la Ted Bundy.
I was going to say that as well. Like, you can see Ted Bundy getting van.
Yep. So Ted Bundy, if you don't know, he lured his victims in by pretending that he was injured and that he needed assistance, and then getting into his car, putting something into his car, and then he would, like, bundle the women in and unfortunately murder them. And so that's what Buffalo Bill does here. He is playing on her, just human nature, like, want to help your fellow person, kindness, exactly. And he gets her into the van and not, like, brutally beats her up. I was actually, when I heard, I was, that's quite horrible to hear, like, several punches to this woman, and he rips her top off. Yeah, and we see, like, he, like, admires her flesh.
It's reverence, isn't it? It's this, like, stroking down her back, and like, this reverent. But again, it's like you said about when he's sort of, when he's looking at himself and he's got that necklace on. It's that, well, it is, I suppose, reverence in the same way that religion is reverent but objectifying. It's the removal of the humanity from so it's like a reverence for what she represents, which is this opportunity for him to get more skin for this suit. And but it's like when he says, what are you, about size 14? And she's like, what? And then he clobbers her, and it's just, he knows that. He's eyeballed that when he's, and then obviously he cuts her clothes off, and I do think that bit is mercifully quite brief. And I do think if somebody made this film now, it'd be really graphic, and it'd be ages, and he'd have strung her up in van, and it'd have been awful.
Yeah,
and
you're right.
I do think that as a film, and that's probably because it was made in 91 and everything else, it is very sensitive in its, you see when Clarice is at that autopsy and they turn her over and you can see darts are missing out of her back. But that's a plot that we need to see that.
We truly need to see that. Yes.
Yeah. And I never feel it's excessive. It never feels excessive.
No, I agree. And I think, like, so he rips off the shirt, and we as the audience see it's a US 14, and he almost like makes this like orgasmic sound to that. He's so like yeah, like yes, US 14. Yeah. So it was like, again, this is 91. Like, has that changed? What's a US 14 in today's money, as it were? And I found an article. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Right. So basically, clothes sizes are trash. If you shop nowadays, like you'll be like a size 18 in one place, you'll be a size 24 in others. There's no standardization. So I found this article from the Times, as in like not the British one, the American one, from 2014 from Laura Stampler. And basically, sizing, like standardized sizing, didn't become a thing until the 40s. And before then, like it was based on age. So if you were 16 years old, you'd be a size 16. Yeah. And it was mainly around the bust measurement. And the reason why it wasn't really standardized is because most people, well, I say most women knew how to sew. So you would just make your own clothes to your own sizes. So like not many people were just buying stuff off the rack. And it wasn't until it was like in the 1940s that they start to like look at standardizing sizes. And how they did it is they surveyed 15,000 women in America, and they just measure them up, and then they just kind of put them into categories and I guess like a bit of a bell curve and like where do people fit. But the survey completely dismissed people, women of color. They would come in and then they just would measure them and then like not take their measurements forward. And because you got a participation fee, it's thought that maybe women from like lower socioeconomic class went, and they may have been like more malnourished. So therefore they might have been lower than your average size anyway. So that happened. And then when they started looking again at sizing, like I guess to make it better, so catalog shopping became really popular after World War II. So the National Bureau of Standards came and they're like, right, we need to standardize this further. I think it was sponsored by some kind of catalog as well, because obviously, like, you know, corporation and government are properly intertwined. And but when they were doing this sizing, they were measuring women in the Air Force, who are obviously like the fit women in the country. So again, it was super skewed because they were not measuring everyone. Then in the 50s into the 60s, we got into what is called vanity sizing, which is when they wanted consumers to feel better about their sizes. So they started like making the smaller sizes bigger. So like in 1958, a size US 8 was a bust of 31 inches and a waist of 23.5 inches. And then they added 5 to 6 inches each measurement, like to make more people, I guess, like bigger bodies fit into smaller sizes. And then so there's the government kind of stopped doing or standardized sizing, and this organization called the American Society for Testing Materials, or ASTM for short, they now have like they're like a private company who's involved in standardizing sizes. And so a 2008 size 8 is an equivalent to a 1958 14 to 16. And then a size 2 in 2011 is similar to a 1995 size 4 to 6. So based on those numbers, a size 14 in 91 could be more like a size 12 now. So that's like, and that's in the US, and so you have sizes like for the 10. UK. So and you're just like, she's barely big.
I mean, she's not big. I mean, when you look at her, when you see her, she's not big. I mean, she's not, you know, it's and I do think that represents, and again, we've just had Oscars and there's a lot of talk about representation, and we're still not doing enough in any category, you know, in any way, in terms of gender, in terms of ethnicity, in terms of size, you know, diversity. There's not enough diversity. But the fact that a woman who's like a size 10 is classed as, you know, I mean, our small's Jodie Foster then. That's the thing. Like, how small is she? If she's looking at these women who are like a size 10 and going, they're so big, that's why, you know, it's like, well, how small is she? For that to be such a difference.
And I think maybe it's really telling that they don't show Jodie Foster in comparison to the
Yeah.
supposedly big victims.
Yeah.
Because I think actually, if you compare the two, you might not see much of a difference, but the whole plot is that he is targeting bigger women. And again, like, it goes into this idea like, well, could they not have cast bigger women? And it's
Yeah.
like, well, no, because studios don't cast bigger
No.
women. It's like, this is big enough, like big enough to get our point across. Yeah, I
And I suppose you never really see her, do you? You never really see Martin.
no. So they keep her in the dark, and then she's down the
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
So we barely actually see her. But let's actually talk about Catherine Martin and like the very little character we do see of her. Like, what kind of a person do we get across? So she's obviously a very kind person. Oh, talking about, you mentioned class. She's from an incredibly powerful family
Yeah.
because her mother is like the senator of wherever she's from.
Yeah.
And that plays a real part in the plot because that's how, so it's
Yeah.
interesting how it's already been 5 victims by this point
Yeah.
and not a lot's really happened, and all of a sudden the senator's daughter is like, well, we must do something now. It's like, well, where was this urgency of those other 5 women?
And you see that, I mean, that is, I don't know whether that were on purpose. I would hope it were on purpose, but you see that so often in investigations. If and that sort of moment when Annabelle Lecter's saying, what do we begin to cover that we see every day? And that's how she understands that one of these victims he knows. But that is obviously a woman in a similar environment to him. So the first woman that he murdered, we can assume from that, lived in a very similar socioeconomic sort of status to him. And so they were allowed to go on and kill 5 other women and kidnap another because these women are disposable. And you can add in the sort of, I'm sure there's a class element to that, a fat phobic element to that. I'm sure there's a lot of, all these elements to it. And it's not until, as you say, it's a woman with this privilege, with a powerful mother who's raining hell down on the FBI and saying, find her, that actually anybody really takes notice. And interesting that it don't get to FBI till then. So that's 5 other cases that have if they're all at the same place, they're all investigated by it. But the fact that it weren't escalated to FBI until this point is interesting because it's obviously a serial killer. I mean, it only takes 3. You only need 3 and it's a serial killer. So it were well on his way past that. And yet, at this point, still no investigation. So there is that element at play as well. And I think it is, I hope it were a conscious choice, I suppose, when they made it, that was sort of implied. You don't know.
We don't know. And I think it'd be interesting to read the book because I'm sure it would go into more detail about that. But I think definitely from the film, especially looking at it 30 years later, there is definitely some kind of commentary going on. Or even if there isn't, then that just shows the problem, right? The fact that they've gone from a plot point of view. Well, the only reason now that someone's really gonna make Buffalo Bill pay is because it's someone who has come from privilege. Like you mentioned, the other 5 are expendable to this point. And that is heartbreaking. Actually saying that out loud, going, "Oh no," because we don't even know their names. We don't even. We see one other face, But going back to Catherine, then. So, what do you think her character is? Is she, from the very little we see of her, is she well thought out? Does she have a personality?
I think she is. I think she's, so like you said, we see that she's a kind person because she's helped him even though she shouldn't have done. Warning, never help us. I don't care if your arms and your legs and everything's broke, I'm not helping you get in a van.
Fuck politeness, man.
Fuck politeness. No, I'm sorry.
No.
Ask that bloke over there.
Ask a bloke.
What are you asking me for? I'm not lifting a sofa. So it's, but and I think so. You see that from her then, and then obviously she has the fear, like the understandable fear.
Oh,
But
yeah.
even then, and then I think, you know, when she has that breakdown and she's screaming and he's going, it puts the lotion on its skin, and then it's like, it puts the
Yes.
lotion in the basket. But the thing about that as well, and I know we're going to talk a little bit about, is what is he trying to do in terms of coming at it from, is it a sort of commentary on him, is he trans, is he not, is he just try? But when he's like, she's crying and he's crying, like he's trying to mimic her, and you can't tell if he's mocking her or if he's trying to trying to be like her. That's a really weird moment, I think, because again, his intention is so unclear. Is he, you know, but then to get back to Catherine, then you see that she's willing to, she's a fighter. She, like Clarice, she's a survivor.
Yes.
And she gets that little dog and she's like, I'll kill this fucking dog. You get me out of here. And and so I know there aren't many women in it, but the women that are in it are all badass. Clarice, Catherine, even a mum coming in going, I'm not taking no fucking prisoners here.
Yeah, 100%.
So although there could be and should be more women in it, you know, but the ones that are, I feel like they're shown as capable and as survivors and as being willing to do what it takes to survive. And I like to see that. I hate to see things where women are just painted as the damsel just waiting, you know, but that's what makes this interesting in a way, is that it's a woman. Look, it's a woman coming to save another woman. She's not waiting for some FBI guy to come and stick his head up at top of all and go, I'm here, I'll save you. It's Clarice who's coming for, you know, to save her. So that's powerful, I think, in its representation.
Yeah, definitely. I think her scheme to get the dog, Precious, is so good.
Yeah.
And it's so smart. And the fact that, like, you know, it doesn't work the first time, so she keeps going. And you're just like, she's obviously got like determination, perseverance, like she's not going down without a fight. And actually, we find out through the well, that the other women fought, because you can.
Oh God, I was just going to say about that bit. That's, oh my God, that is one of the bits that stuck in my mind as a kid, when she sees fingernail,
yeah,
starts to scream, because you think you would, wouldn't you?
Yeah, because you don't know what's going to happen, right?
No.
So that's the idea. She has no idea what her fate is, but as soon as you see like bloody fingernails, and you know you're not the first one, and you're like,
that's the thing, in it. She's like, he's done this before.
He's done this before.
Somebody's obviously not got out of here. And
yeah.
like, it's that I always think that sort of motif in films, that like fingernails, that you know, fingers that you see, it is so horrifying every time you ever see it. Like it's just it's so awful.
It's history. Like, in such a simple shot, like she all of a sudden gets like context of where she is, and it's terrifying, you know, obviously, because it's interesting, she doesn't know his name, so she keeps on calling him Mr. like Mr. And like, you know, she doesn't know whether she can sweet talk out of it. I'll never tell anyone, like, you know, she all these bargaining tools that she does, and then she sees the fingernail and just screams hysterically.
And it's awful.
Because she realizes, oh no, like, he's not going to give up. He doesn't want me to get out. I am done. And so that's where she starts to scheme. And I like you say, I absolutely adore that, like, it is a woman coming to save another woman. I do find it funny because obviously from Kathy's point of view, she's like, get me the fuck out of here. But it's like, no, we're still in danger, but I can't tell you we're in danger because you'll freak out more. But she's like, shut that fuck up.
Because I mean, when she does get to her, I mean, she is a bit annoying, but you're like, she's been stuck in an hole for 3 days. Like, I'd be annoying. I'd be like, get me out of here, what the fuck?
No, 100%. And I think because you hear you know, the FBI coming in, you're like, oh well, she'll have a team, there'll be a squad, there's guns. You're like, oh my God, I'm saved. And so she's like, well, why are you not getting me out of here? Like, what's the hold up? She doesn't realize that Clarice has stumbled upon this, like, you know, it wasn't intentional, that she's still very much in danger. And I just love the very short dynamic between the two of the frustration of women just being like, shut up.
Just shut up, I'm doing it, get me out of here, I'm in it all.
I know. And actually, but when Clarice realizes where she is and her nervousness to get her gun out, and then she, you know, every move she makes is so erratic, like it's just like bursting through the door and or like, you know, wedging herself into a door, and like just so awkward and just not sleek, not not cool, but it is
Yeah.
cool because we're like,
Yeah.
she is standing up for herself, she's standing up for her, the person she's here to save, and she's like, I am getting out of here. She's so
Yeah.
determined in that moment. But yeah, I think Catherine is, from what we see of her, we do get quite a bit and quite understanding of her. And then obviously at the end, she's been threatening the dog for the past, I don't know, last half hour of the film.
Yeah.
And then she walks out like cradling the
Yeah.
dog. And I was like, oh, I hope her and Precious.
I hope she keeps Precious.
Yeah, I do too. I do too. I do too. But actually, going back to Buffalo Bill, and you're querying like, is he mocking her or does he empathize with her? He has a pet. He has these moths, which we haven't even touched on the moths.
Yeah.
You know, he
a weird plot point that I felt like.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's like it's massively important to the imagery.
Yeah. Man, you don't look like a man who keep moths. I'm sorry, I don't buy it.
What does a man who keeps moths look like then, Meg?
I feel like it's conflicting interests.
He has too much going on. He's a very busy man.
It's too much. I don't believe you've got a dog. You've got to walk this dog. You've got to live your life. Yeah. You know, you're skinning women. You're making a suit. You obviously,
does he have a job?
He must. I don't know. Does he?
Does he have a job? Yeah. Is it
they just seem in odds to me, but it is important for the imagery. You're right. So we enjoy and I get it. The moth. It's like a transformation thing, and again, that comes back to this idea that. What is he trying to be? This is obviously about his transformation. Yes. Like he's going to make this suit, and his end goal is that he'll put it on and he'll transform into someone else. But like, it's never really clear.
No,
what that transformation is or what it's going to be.
But he doesn't know either.
No.
And I think that's a point that Dr. Lecter makes, is that like he thinks the answer is to change I guess change genders or become a woman. He's been rejected from transgender gender affirmation surgery. So he's kind of taken it into his own hands. What I find it interesting, instead of like, doing anything to himself, which I guess, if you were to get gender affirmation surgery, that would be something to you, but he's still projecting that out, and then he's going to wear it like a second skin instead.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because that's obviously like you'd still be you inside the skin.
Yeah.
So I
mean, go on.
I was just gonna say, I wonder like how far has he thought about it? And I get like, we don't actually know, because we're not really given a lot about Buffalo Bill, but it reeks of desperation. It reeks of this idea like I have to change myself, but I don't want to hurt myself. I happily hurt these women, but I won't hurt myself. And even on that, then like when we have again the scene where he's dancing in front of the mirror, he's saying like, I'd fuck me. So he obviously doesn't find himself too disgusting, for lack of a better term. Like he obviously likes what he sees in the mirror. He still wants to change. It's very like, I don't know whether it's intentionally muddled to kind of show that he really doesn't know what he wants either. Or whether it is just like not really well thought out. And I guess to the transgender points, I guess we have to talk about it. I'm a cis woman, so I appreciate I'm maybe not the best persons to comment on it, but we have a history within media. I guess this is why we're talking about fat representation. We have a history in media of demonizing and victimizing marginalized people, and that especially falls in to the LGBTQIA community. And I think where there probably isn't many films where they, especially in the 90s, where they were featuring characters that could be viewed as trans, it is not great that the murderer is, for lack of a better term, they query it in the film that he's not truly a transgender person, but it's a line, it's one line for for the rest of it. He does want to be a woman. That's what we take from him, and it's not great. It's not great representation at all.
No, and obviously to echo you, like I'm a cis woman, and so I don't presume to to be the authority on it.
No.
But I think you're right. Like, it's something that in this film it does have to be addressed, and it is a very negative. It's very negative. It's very lazy. I think it feels very lazy to me. It's lazy writing, because it is that demonization of a group that people are encouraged to fear. A baseless fear, you know. Absolutely. If you actually look at statistics about who is likely to be getting women and skinning them, you know, trans people are way down on that list. That's just not an accurate. It's not an accurate representation. And obviously this is based on Ed Gein, and we still don't really fully know what Ed Gein's motives were, although they were very heteronormative, sexually compulsive behaviors. Whether, you know, I don't think there's ever as far as I'm aware, never been any suggestion that Ed Gein were trans. It were more that he were very, very traumatized from his relationship with his mother, and that had become really twisted up for him because he were like sort of, you know, in this sort of heterosexual dynamic. And then he was sort of trying to become his mother, I guess, rather than becoming a woman. And so if they've used that as a motivation, which we know that was a motivation for Buffalo Bill's character, but then to just sort of drop in this bit about, oh, he's being rejected for surgery, well, that's such a leap.
Yeah.
To go, oh, he's been rejected for surgery, so instead he's going to kidnap women and kill them and make a suit. Like, it's just, it is a very lazy plot point that I don't think were even necessary, to be honest. I don't think it just, again, like you've said, it just further demonizes a community that's been through enough, and it's still, actually, you know, we look at this now.
I mean, now, and
it's even worse than it's ever been, and it's absolutely horrendous, and it, you know, it just gets worse and worse, and it is, again, I mean, I can't think of many portrayals of that we've seen, even from 91 to now, of trans people, and even less that have been positive, you know, that have been a fair representation of people. And so, it's very lazy and unnecessary, and you know, that scene where he's dancing and he's sort of tucked his genitals back, and it's like seen as it's like, I don't think it's played for humour in the film, but obviously there's been a lot subsequently where people have played that for laughs.
100%.
And that's really toxic and cruel and unpleasant as well. And again, I mean, I'll not get on my soapbox about it, but, you know, this idea that artists and people who make art have got no responsibility for how the work's interpreted, and I disagree with that. I think you can't always, you make something, you make a film, for instance, you put it out into the world, you can't police how everyone's going to interpret your art. That's just, art is subjective. But I do think that when things are like that, quite clearly able to be used against someone, then you have got a responsibility to have a clarity of your position. And they could have done that. They could have either expressly been sympathetic, or they could have, you know, been more explicit. It could have been much less muddled in terms of what his motivations were. And it's a lazy choice not to do it, and also like an irresponsible one. And it's not like people can go, well, it were 91, trans people didn't exist, because that's absolute bullshit.
That's not true, guys.
So it's, I do think that is an element of it that is very negative.
I 100% agree with everything you've just said. It's interesting, isn't it, that kind of like, oh, well, I just put it out there, it's not my responsibility to monitor how people consume it. Sure, but there's a difference between punching on your level or punching down, and we're punching down here. And I think, like, to kind of wrap up why we're talking about Silence of the Lambs and why we're talking specifically about Buffalo Bill and Catherine Martin right now, is that these marginalized identities, right, are the basis for their character. So it's not Buffalo Bill's motivation, like at the most simplest point, is to, like, he believes it's to become a woman and wear a woman's suit, right? So that is demonizing the idea of being transgender.
Yeah.
That is his motivation.
Yeah.
They argue in the film whether it's true transgenderism or not, but that is it. We are not given any more context than that.
Yeah.
Catherine Martin is victimized because she is in a bigger body, and that's
Mhm.
it. There's no, I mean, obviously she's a woman, so I guess half the population, right, because of that. And then, it's a subsect of that population are because she is bigger, she's being victimized, and that's it. So the film has gone. Those two things are completely valid reasons to be a murderer or be murdered, and that is shit. Now, to bring another film from the 90s, Seven.
Oh God. Yeah.
So the very first murder of that film is the deadly sin of gluttony. And when Morgan Freeman and Brad Pitt go and investigate the scene, Brad Pitt is the most dismissive bastard in the world. He's so nasty and cruel, and basically saying, like, why is this a murder scene? Like, he clearly just ate himself to death, because he's a very, very big man is the victim. And he's like, oh, he clearly, it's clearly a heart attack. Why would we even do an autopsy? Like, completely flippant to the idea that this person could be murdered. And then when they do confirm he was poisoned, I believe it's poisoned, isn't it? They go to their chief of police, and Morgan Freeman's character is he's really sure that this is like a target. And the chief of police says, oh, well, somebody wanted the fat boy dead, as if that's a completely valid reason to be murdered. And I'm like, we don't know anything about this victim other than the fact that he is a fat man. And I guess with The Silence of the Lambs, her entire reason why she's targeted is because she's a fat woman. And it's just this, like, the film passes it as if it's a completely not valid, because obviously it's not people aren't praising it or allowing it, but it is almost like, okay, well, that's it, that's just his MO. He goes after fat women, we've got to deal with it. And then, like,
don't be fat.
Don't be
a woman.
Don't be a woman.
Don't be fat.
Don't be fat. If you
exist.
If you have to be a woman, don't be fat. Like,
but also don't be too small, because then you can't fight them off.
Yeah,
but don't be too big because you can't run away.
And what?
Don't be,
that's probably the bigger question. Like, regardless of what kind of characteristics you have, someone somewhere will find a reason to victimize you for it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But I do think that the overwhelming message of it is, well, unfortunately, a truism, which is that it's not your fault as a woman. Why? So, I think whether it says that clearly enough, I think it could be argued it doesn't. But really, the message is that, or the message should be, what people take away from it is that it don't matter what the reason is, it's not your fault, because there'll always be a man who wants to hurt fat women, there'll always be a man who wants to hurt thin women, who wants to hurt blonde women.
That's it.
There'll always be a reason. And you reduce all these things down and all these factors down, and what do you get? Straight white men.
Yeah, I know.
That's the danger. It's
I know.
And it's and again, like, to say, as you say, like, the fact that the only two defining things for these two characters are the elements of their existence that mean they are the most marginalized.
Yeah, is
bad. And it is, unfortunately, though, it's not even like it's just indicative of that time, because we're still seeing that now in representation. And it is really really sad that we don't get, and that's why podcasts like this are so important. That's why seeing representation of people is so important. Of everybody, of all body types, all 100%. Backgrounds, all everybody deserves to see themselves represented, because we all live on this planet at the most base level. We're all consumers of media. So, now all these people getting butter about Everything Everywhere All at Once, winning Oscars, and it's like, and I saw about Turning Red, that people were complaining. Some white male reviewer said, I can't relate to this, so it's not a good film. And it's like, well, welcome to being anybody who's not straight white, you know, heteronormative, like don't see the self-represented, or if they do, it's negative. You know, like there's room. You've had the field for long enough. Give someone else a chance. You know,
absolutely. Like I couldn't agree more. As someone who adored both of those films, Everything Everywhere All at Once and Turning Red, I just think, like, you know what? Not all media is to placate every single person.
yeah.
But there's this thing where they just think the standard is white straight man, and if you do anything apart from you know, focus your media on any other audience apart from straight white man, oh well, then you're woke, you're political, you're you're isolating audiences. And I'm just like, well, you know what, you don't have to watch it, you can just turn it off. Like it's mad to think that like you think everything should be for you, but at the same time, challenge yourself and try and empathize with someone who doesn't look like you, because we've all had to do it for years. Like but I think that's ultimately the problem, is that they've never had to do it. So then they're asking them to do it. They're like, but how does one do it? And then like media literacy is way down just across the board. Like people really are struggling to like critically analyze media anyway. But then you're adding this other thing, which is like, okay, well, also like we're going to have like every other person that hasn't been the star of these films are now the star of these films. They're just like, oh well, how can I relate to this, because they don't look like me? I'm like, well, I can relate to things when they don't look like me.
It's ridiculous, isn't it? It's like, what does that have to do with you? If somebody's a well-written character and the story is interesting, why? I don't understand. I've never understood this idea.
I don't get it. No,
about,
I agree.
I can't relate to somebody's experience because it's not my experience. It's like, isn't that why you watch films? Isn't that why you do things? Because you want to see other people's experiences.
Well, you'd think.
You would, wouldn't you? And it's so reductive, and it's so, again, laziness. It's just laziness. And
it is lazy.
I don't want to watch a film about my life. I want to see other people's lives. I want to see other things. Escapism, you know, and having an opportunity to see. I mean, for us as horror fans, I mean, we're used to being like, you know, women as horror fans for a long time. You know, we were just slasher fodder, weren't we? We were just, you know, but again, it doesn't stop women being fans of horror, even when they've not been represented. You can see problems with it, and you hope to support films that tell different stories. But I'm not sitting here going, oh, I can't watch this film because only women that are in it die within the first sort of 10 minutes. Like, well, all right, it's not brilliant. But yeah, just this thing about media literacy and people not being able to critique, and people not being able to think critically of things, and also to appreciate other people's perspectives. It's not helping us as a society in any way. Like, it's really weakening us as a society that we you know, I mean, we talk about it in Ghouls Chat, and about, you know, these pure teens is one of the funniest things that I've you know,
so interesting.
And this idea now that young people don't want to see sex on screen, or they don't want to be confronted by things. And I think, well, you know, obviously there's a time and a place to be confronted with things. I'm a fan of a lot of French extremity. Some of it I really don't like. It's not for me. But again, it's just not for me.
Yeah. You know, doesn't mean it doesn't have an audience.
Yeah. I'm not a Marvel. I've never seen a Marvel film.
Oh, you're lucky.
I mean, you know, I've never seen one. It's a real sorry state of affairs to be saying that something shouldn't exist just because you don't like it.
Yeah.
You know, that it don't speak to you. I find it's a narcissism, really, isn't it? It's a very narcissistic point.
Yeah. And it's also like the death of art. It's the death of expression. Like this idea that like everything you do must find a massive audience. Like, no, like, you know, some things are super niche. I just think, I really hope this is just like a weird blip we're having, and we'll start to get better at it again. I do think the films that are like the lower, non-superhero films that are coming out
Yeah.
are so good, and they are doing well at the box office, which means that hopefully studios will take
Yeah.
bigger chances on like the smaller. I'd love the rom-com to come back. I fucking love a rom-com. Yeah, like I mean, like, I love all genres, but like I just want to, like, sometimes I just want to watch like something fun and watch like two people fall in love. Like
Yeah.
why is that just like cinema like doesn't come to the cinema anymore? I just think it's weird. We're in a weird position. I think streaming services have a lot to answer for actually with it all. But I am hopeful. We have to be hopeful. If we're media fans, we have to be hopeful things will change.
Yeah.
So I think we should wrap up.
Yes.
Is there, because we've been talking for a while, but is first of all, I want to ask you, would you recommend this film if people hadn't seen it?
Yes, I would recommend it.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously with the caveats that we have mentioned.
Yes.
But I do think you have to take it very much as a product of its time and its context.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not to say that the things that we've critiqued it on were any less critique worthy then.
Mm-hmm.
But I do, I mean, obviously it did really well at Oscars. I don't necessarily think that's the barometer by which to judge things.
Mm-hmm.
But the acting in it and the casting is fantastic. And I do think it's worth a watch.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I would say so.
Okay, and then I'm doing this thing where I'm rating films and media based on myself, for specifically for fat representation, not how much you enjoyed the film, but how well you think it represents body diversity. So out of 5 Megs, how many would you rate it?
Ooh. 4.
Oh, that's really good.
4 Megs, yes. Oh, I think most of that might be nostalgia, I have to be honest.
No, that's fair. No, I mean that's completely fair. Like your rating is your rating. I think I'm not gonna rate it as high as you. I think I'm gonna give it 2.5.
Okay.
2.5 Hannahs.
2.5
Because
Hannahs.
2.5 Hannahs. And just because um and maybe this is just me talking. I don't want to see fat bodies get brutalized.
No, and actually, no, I don't. If I think it's, yes, I agree. I do think that is, it's making me want to change my rating.
Oh, you can absolutely you can do what you want. You can change your rating.
But I think, based on based on this podcast, based on everything we've talked about, 3 Megs.
3 Megs. Okay, so 2.5 Hannahs, 3 Megs.
Yeah,
okay, that is what we're locking in.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so stupid. Right. So thank you so much, Meg, for coming on and chatting Silence of the Lambs. It is an awesome film. Like, as much like you mentioned, as much as it's got those caveats because it's 30+ years old, it's still the tension, the suspense, the pacing is just top banana. The sound, the what am I trying to say? The soundtrack, all of it. It really is a brilliant film. It's one of those films I'd love to see in the cinema one day, and I'm sure it probably does come round every so often, right? By the way, thank you so much, Meg, for joining me on this podcast, Fats on Film. And where can the lovely listeners find you?
Oh, well, thank you very much for having me. I've very much enjoyed our chat.
Good.
People can find me at Monstrous Meg, so it's Monstrous_Meg on Instagram and Twitter, but I've only recently made the Twitter profile, so there's nothing on there yet. Because I still think Twitter's a dying medium. I don't know why.
I mean, I don't know. I'm on there too, but like for how long? Who knows?
How long? Who knows? And also on my Instagram, there is a link to my link tree, and people can find all my reviews, as well as the Monstrous Flesh podcast. So I would recommend following Monstrous Flesh as well. And you'll be able to find out we'll be doing some more screening and panel events and many fun things. So
that's so cool.
Yeah,
loads of stuff going on.
Oh yes, busy.
You know what? One thing I love about the horror community is like someone's always got something going on.
Yes,
love it. Thank you so much, Meg. And I guess the listeners can also find me. I'm Queen Bee Says on Instagram and Twitter, and the podcast is also on Instagram and Twitter as at Fats on Film. So thank you so much for listening. We'll catch you in the next one. Bye.
Bye.